In this video, we are continuing section 1.5 on solving equations, and we're ready for our last rule, which is rule 9. And this just kind of summarizes all the situations that we've seen where we need to check for extraneous solutions. So when do we need to do this? I actually first want to pause the video. There's actually 3 situations we've seen where we need to do this. I want to have you pause the video for 1 minute and see if you can remember. You might have to look back at your notes, but first try doing it without looking back at your notes. Pause it for 1 minute and see if you can remember the 3 situations where we gotta check. 4, 3, 2, 1, pause it. See if you can remember them. All right, so hopefully you did that. Hopefully you either could remember some of them or maybe look back to your notes to recall some of these situations. So the first situation we saw was if we had variables in the denominator. So if I have an equation that I'm solving and I had variables in the denominator, I have to check at the end whether they're extraneous or not. The second situation we saw was if we had variables inside of even roots. So those are things like square roots or 4th roots or 6th roots. I got to check for extraneous. The last situation we've seen so far is when we had variables in absolute values when we're solving our equation. There again, we had to check our answers at the end to see if they're extraneous. There is a 4th situation which we'll see later in the course, and that involves equations where you end up using log rules. Okay, so those are things like, if you have a log, plus like another log, maybe I have a log of x plus 2. Well, I get to make this becomes 1 log, and I multiply the insides together to get x times x plus 2. We'll see stuff like that later in the class, so we don't really need to worry about that for right now. So I'm just going to write down that we're going to see stuff like this in either week 7 or 8. So towards the second half of the course. Okay, so if it's situation 1, if I have variables in the denominator, that's the quickest one to check, because all we got to do is just make sure that when you plug them in, just make sure that the denominator is not 0. As long as the denominator is not 0, it should work, assuming you did all the algebra correctly up until that point. In the other 2 situations, in all these other situations, we are actually going to have to plug in and ensure that both sides are equal. So that involves more work. We typically can't just do it in our heads. We actually have to plug in, simplify a bit, and then verify whether the 2 sides are equal or not.